It is the MLS Cup final on Saturday afternoon. Inter Miami taking on Vancouver Whitecaps. And to give us some more detail to dive deeper into the matchup and Inter Miami, we are proud to and happy to welcome Franco Panizo, reporter with Miami Total Football. Good morning and welcome into Morning Kickaround, sir.
Thank you, guys. I'm used to these things being at night. This is I think, my first time in a long time doing this in the morning. So hopefully
What
I
we
sound
do, Franco. Buona mañana. Okay. So, first of all, thank you very much for doing this. Sort of late notice to grab Franco, but couldn't think of anybody better to talk Inter Miami than Franco Panizo. You've been covering this team since the beginning, right? You got down there right as this team was launching. So you've seen the various eras. In fact, I was doing some trivia on the radio yesterday, and somebody was like, who's the third all-time leading scorer for Inter Miami? And I was like, I don't know. And they said Leo Campana. I was like, I can't believe that's crazy. Leo Campana. Obviously, this is not the Leo Campana era anymore. This is a different team. Lots of things have happened, though, in the last couple months to change the fortunes a bit, Franco. Give us a thumbnail sketch on, again, those developments, how this team maybe has changed as they've marched their way to this final.
I mean, the biggest change is, of course, what we saw in the playoffs with Nashville making the complaint or the petition to review Luis Suarez's kick out on Andy Najar. That led to Luis Suarez being suspended for the decisive game of that 3-match series. They played so well. Javier Mascherano, after the game, called it a near-perfect performance from his team. And then in the next game against FC Cincinnati, they stuck with the 4-3-3 as opposed to the 4-4-2 we've seen for almost 99% of the season. And Luis Suarez was benched. And in benching Luis Suarez, which was a surprise at the moment when he was available again, they became more of a modern soccer team. They became more of an MLS soccer team because they had more legs, more energy, more ability to run around the field, right? That was the knock on them throughout much of the season. We heard Julian Gressel at a different point. We heard the Vancouver Whitecaps in the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals say that physically the team didn't have the legs to match up with their opponents. And I mean, it's hard to argue against that when you've got Sergio Busquets in the midfield, Lil Messi and Luis Suarez up top, even though they put in their efforts, but it's still not at that top level of physical exertion that you get from players in and around MLS. So now they've become more of a modern team, more physical or athletic team. And on top of that, they still have that skill that separates them from much of the rest of the league, right? You still have Messi, you still have players like Toto Silvetti, who's come into the picture to help give him some freshness, but also some skill up in the attack. So they are a very well-rounded team right now. You know, they've won 3 games in a row now by 4 goals, 4-0, 4-0, and 5-1, which is remarkable. I mean, Jason, maybe you have it off the top of your head, but I can't remember an MLS team that comes into MLS Cup in that fashion. So they're in really good shape. I expect the Vancouver Whitecaps to be a tough matchup. I don't expect a 4-goal difference in this one, but Inter Miami is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how that change happened in the postseason. It's kind of wild how individual events can have such a knock-on effect. Like you said, Nashville petition got the suspension, but it ended up working completely against them as they went on to Miami went on to a big win there. How surprised are you that this change came internally? Because kind of the whole preview of the season kind of looked like obviously they could score goals, but always looked vulnerable. Something wasn't quite right with the balance. How surprising was it that the change to improve it so drastically, the parts were already there in the building?
So they brought Matteo Silvetti in the summer, and he showed some flashes before he left to the Under-20 World Cup with Argentina. So he wasn't around enough to really get a good idea of what he could do, although, again, he showed some flashes. But he's a teenager. And we were expecting Mascherano to stick with his 4-4-2 that we've seen. But when the complaint happened or the petition happened and they played so well without him and they looked so much better, I'm sure there were some tough conversations had behind closed doors. And outwardly, they're going to say all these nice flowery things that Luis Suarez took it on the chin in the best way possible. And he's team first and he's in great spirits and all that. I can imagine the conversations were not easy. That's just my supposition. That's not inside information. But we had asked Mascherano throughout the year at different times when Suarez wasn't scoring or he wasn't playing well about his starting role. I specifically would ask him, and his answer, Mascherano's answer, would more or less be along the lines of, he's a big part of the project. The club has decided to make him a big part of the project. And to me, it read as he couldn't bench him.
Right.
Couldn't.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, whether it's contractual, whether it's he's because of his stature and who he is, they just can't bet. Whatever the case is, it seemed like there was an inability to take him out of the starting lineup until that suspension happened. And they saw how well he played. Maybe then he made a case, or again, I don't know what happened behind closed doors to continue on in this manner, but something clearly happened for them to finally make that decision on a regular.
To be a fly on the wall, at team headquarters, when Jorge Mas maybe is talking to Javier Mascherano about this, or Luis Suarez is that, and again, that it's obvious. Like, as you said, they played so well that the evidence was right there. And I do think this is obviously a credit to Mascherano, who, when he was hired, I don't know how you felt, Franco, at the time, but when he was hired, it was like, oh, Mascherano's coming over just to caddy for Messi, and he's just going to he's just going to be the face while Messi pulls all the strings. And we've even had former players in MLS who didn't play in Miami go to the media in Europe and say, nobody wants to go to Miami, or you shouldn't go to Miami because Messi and his group control everything. And I'm like, if I'm a fan of Inter Miami, why do I care at all if Messi and his family and his people control everything if you're winning soccer games, if you're on your way to an MLS Cup final, which seems to be the case? So even if Mascherano's not the guy actually making all the decisions, it's working. They're in a final. They're hosting a final, and they're significant favorites to win a cup.
I mean, yeah, if you look at it that way and look at it short term, and if they do win, then everything looks much more positive. If they don't win, and then your future is mortgaged as a result, then you come back and look at
this. But that's an interesting thing, right? Okay, so again, Sergio Busquets is leaving, Jordi Alba is retiring. Those two guys are out. This will be their final game as professionals, which is interesting considering especially how well Jordi Alba is playing right now. But that thing about mortgaging the future, with this, they made the final. They run roughshod over everybody in the playoffs, something they couldn't do last year. Yeah, the regular season wasn't as good, but you're willing to make that trade-off because the thing in MLS is to win the MLS Cup title.
Right.
If they lose on Saturday, how bad is that? Like, how much of how bad does that look, especially with the stadium opening up next year, which if they could carry the MLS Cup trophy into Miami Freedom Park, Jorge Mas might explode with excitement.
MLS Cup final is big for any team that participates in it, but for Inter Miami, it's massive because this will define how the year is looked at in its totality. They haven't won anything this year, right? So they need to win this in order for this season to be deemed a success. You need to see Messi and everyone with the pink and black and white and gray confetti holding MLS Cup. You have to see that if you're an Inter Miami fan in order to deem this a success, because if you do not win this, the season was a case of almost, right? They got to the CONCACAF Champions Cup semis. They got into the Leagues Cup final. I mean, they made it out of the Club World Cup group stage, but they were never expected to really do much there. So that they exceeded expectations there. But in every other competition regionally that they should be winning, they haven't won. So this, they have to win in order for this year to be a success, which is, I mean, it might be unfair in a certain way to Mascherano and co, but that's who they are. That's the bar is much higher than any other team. So it's pass fail. It's pass fail on Saturday.
That pressure has always been the case, or has been throughout the playoffs, and it hasn't really vexed them too much yet. It doesn't seem, with the big results and the lots of goals and how well it's gone in the playoffs so far. But Saturday specifically, Vancouver, obviously a really good team. The series between the two teams, I think Vancouver has 2 wins, Miami has 1. So in this moment, if you were to try to remove yourself from any sort of leanings one way or the other, what do you see? Like, in this moment, how do those teams match up, do you feel?
So I had my colleagues last night on the podcast, Miami Total Football, and I agree with what both of my colleagues said. If there is one team in MLS that can beat this version of Inter Miami, it is this Vancouver Whitecaps, because their strengths play to Inter Miami's weaknesses. So it should be a good matchup. That being said, I think this version of Inter Miami is going to be pretty damn hard to beat, because not only do you have Messi and his ability to win games on his own with his assists or his goals or his free kicks or his dribbling or whatever, everything that we've seen over his career. Not only do you have that ace in the hole, now you have a team around him that can also win games even when he's not at his best, which has not always been the case. Inter Miami largely has always been a team during the Messi era that has needed Messi to be at 8, 9, or 10 points, right? He needs to have the goals and the assists and put the team on his back. And that's the pretty much only formula for Inter Miami to have big games and wins in these decisive matches. Well, we saw against NYCFC, Tadeo Allende scored a hat trick. Messi had just 1 assist in the 5 goals, didn't score. So now you have different pieces that are stepping up around him. You have a system that allows others to better accompany him in the attack. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be a tough task, not just for Vancouver, but for any team. You've seen it in the last 3 games, right? These are the upper echelon Eastern Conference teams, right, on paper. And Inter Miami is doing away with them very easily. I mean, you have Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets looking like much better versions of themselves. Busquets at some point, much of the season, looked a shadow of himself, the shell of himself, and now he looks more like the Busquets of old. Things have gotten a lot more simplified in this 4-3-3 for a lot of players, and it's playing to Inter Miami's strengths as opposed to their weaknesses.
It seems to me like for Mascherano, there, again, with the Suarez question answered, there really aren't any issues with selection on Saturday. You're probably going to roll out the same team that went and whooped up on NYCFC, more or less, barring any.
The only question would be right back. The only question is right back, where Ian Frey was the starter before the international break. He came back with a bit of a knock. So Marcelo Cello Weigand has started the last 2 games. Ian Frey did play in the match against New York City FC. So getting closer to being fully fit, but is he fully fit? If he's not, do you risk starting him? I think that's the only question mark. But besides that, like you said, Jason, the rest of the lineup is easy.
Meanwhile, on the other side, Franco, you have a Vancouver team that, obviously was great, especially in the first half against San Diego, and rode that wave to a conference title and the appearance in this final. But they were missing the defender of the year because of suspension. They started Laborda and Priso at center back, and those are not the guys that would usually be back there. So I think at least if you're Inter Miami, maybe this is actually a good. Jesper Sorensen kind of has. Well, he's got options, which might make it harder for Miami to know what's coming from Vancouver, I think.
So for me, as much as defense is a big part of any game and any final, I think this final is going to have goals, and I think for Vancouver to have a shot at winning, I've said this during the week, they have to do 2 things very well. They have to be impeccable in their attacking transitions, and they have to be ruthless, clinical, lethal, deadly, whatever word you want to put in there, in finishing their chances. If they are neither one of those 2 things, I don't see a way that Vancouver wins this game, because Inter Miami is firing on all cylinders. They've got Tadeo Allende, they've got Silvetti, they've got Messi, they've got Jordi Alba that can pop up down the left wing. They've got Baltasar Rodriguez, who has shown he can score some goals from midfield. Inter Miami's got a lot of different ways to hurt you now. It's not just Messi dependent. So unless Vancouver is near perfect in those 2 regards, in my opinion, I don't see them coming out on top this Saturday.
Curious to ask kind of a boots on the ground kind of a question. Has Miami and that Southern Florida area, is there MLS Cup fever down there? Or is it just restricted to the soccer bubble?
I would say it's probably just restricted to the soccer bubble. I think 2 things have gone against 2 big things have gone against MLS Cup this year. One of them is being the World Cup draw this week that is in Washington, D.C. MLS is having a lot of its events there. Apparently, that's where Don Garber will have his State of the League address. Won't be here in South Florida. Jason, we've been to.
I've been to a lot of those.
We've been to plenty mixers. We've been to plenty media mixers where the league throws events and little shindigs for networking and kind of just to recap the year. And you see everyone from across the country or the countries and the leagues. And apparently that's not happening. So that's definitely taken away from it. And I also think just the quick turnaround obviously has made for not. I mean, listen, it's also the Messi factor here. It's also the Messi factor. Like this today will be the first time that Inter Miami has availability all week, and it's at like a public event where Ian Frey and Yannick Bright are speaking. The only interviews that will be happening, real interviews at training, will be tomorrow and Friday. There's definitely this reservation and not this openness that you get from other MLS teams that culturally are different, right? Inter Miami culturally is more South American, more Latin American, and a little more closed off in that manner. And listen, I'm Hispanic, I'm of South American descent, so before anybody gets upset in the comment section, but they are more closed off.
It's a safe place.
They are more closed off. And look, normally, Jason, MLS MVP gets announced the week of MLS Cup. Whether it's a player that's on the team or not, whoever it is, normally gets announced during MLS Cup, and there's a whole big press conference. Last year, we saw Messi didn't do that, and they did it afterwards. Maybe I was naive in thinking that, since they weren't in the final, he didn't want to do it. Okay, this year they are in the final. He'll do it. He'll have his moment, and it's not on the schedule. It's not on the itineraries, and everything I've heard is that it will happen at some point after MLS Cup, which I think is not the ideal thing for MLS, because if Inter Miami doesn't win, then it takes some shine off of the announcement. Ideally, they probably would want to have it before the game to help drum up the interest. I mean, we're all assuming Messi will win MLS MVP, but obviously that's not just down to their decision, right?
Yeah, look, to tie it to some other recent events, and we don't have time to dive into this, Franco, but maybe we have you back to talk about this because you've covered MLS for so long, and you certainly know the league. MLS is going to go up against college football again on Saturday. I mean, maybe it's not directly challenging the SEC title game, but there's going to be potentially some overlap. People are talking about that again. That has been, from a soccer fan perspective, it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you counter programming one of the biggest events on the sports calendar? I think that you kind of never can really get out of the way of American football, so you just got to deal with it. But MLS is going to flip its calendar, and potentially this final would be, in late May, early June or whatever. And would that be better if this was that time period in South Florida? Would it be a different scene, do you think?
I think it would help. I think that would help. But I think the quick turnaround, the closed off nature of Inter Miami, and the World Cup draw. I mean, obviously that wouldn't happen in May. I think all those things really hurt the
center of the soccer universe in America is not in Miami; it's in DC.
Yes, correct. And a lot of people, colleagues, executives, a lot of people are going to be in DC, Thursday and Friday, and not fly into South Florida until Saturday morning, first thing Saturday morning. So it has taken away some of the shine from MLS Cup. It doesn't feel as MLS Cup-y, if that's the best way.
Interesting. To put it. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
All right. Well, exciting times ahead, and MLS Cup final. You've been following the team since the beginning, so excited for you to be on site for that.
The only media member that has never missed a home game in the entire existence of Inter Miami. I've been to every single game. I'm proud of that streak. There we go. Good job.
Truly a wonderful streak indeed. A Franco Panizo, reporter with Miami Total Football. Thank you for sharing with us here on Morning Kickaround.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, MK Ultras, thank you for chiming in with your comments and viewership. A great interview there. Interesting note that most of the MLS Cup leadership will just be kind of doing a pop in, pop out for the biggest event of the year.
I actually wasn't aware of that, and we're going to talk about the World Cup draw in the next segment. So interesting for your friend Jason to find out that that's the MLS approach to this. While the glitterati of soccer gather in DC, Don Garber and MLS have decided, hey, that's where we want to be ahead of the MLS Cup final.
So we got one more segment on today's show. Be like John Stark, become an MK Ultra. You have a few more minutes to do it in this live show, and MK Ultras get comments priority on screen during these live shows. You get access to the Morning Kickaround Discord server, bonus content, and more. So be like John and become an MK